Líbranos de todo mal, líbranos de todo peligro, Dios. Tú eres un Dios justo, amoroso y eterno. Deseas la justicia para todos y para siempre para defender los derechos de los demás. Permite que tu paz reine en cada ciudadano, que reine el amor en el corazón, para que la venganza, ira y la violencia desaparezca por siempre y para siempre. Siempre te daremos la gloria. Amén. Loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to see the light of a new day. Thank you for the strength you give us to be able to get up and undertake the daily tasks in favor of our community and make the best decisions in order to make the city of New York a safe state for our families, our youth, and our children. Dear God, guide every leader and officials in our government to work in unity so that our leaders may work together for a united city. We are aware that without you, all our efforts will be impossible because it is you who give us the wisdom and intelligence to do your will. Therefore, free us from all evil and from all danger. You are a loving and eternal God because you want justice for all and forever to defend the rights of others. Allow your peace to reign in every citizen. Let love reign in our hearts so that revenge, anger, and violence will disappear forever and ever. We will always give you the glory, Heavenly God, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. I now ask Councilmember Amanda Farías to spread the invocation on the record.
Thank you, Majority Leader. And a special thank you to Pastor Aviles for spreading the invocation over today's stated meeting. It was a beautiful message. I've had the immense pleasure of working with him and the congregation at Casa de la Fe in my first term, as many of you are familiar, to create a 100% affordable housing project for seniors in Soundview to age in place with dignity and with their community. He is a relentless advocate and fighter for our community, and I'm grateful for him joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the adoption of the minutes.
None.
Messages and papers from the mayor.
None.
Communication from city, county, and borough offices.
None.
Petitions and communications.
None.
Land use call-ups.
None.
Thank you. We'll now have communication from Speaker Adrienne Adams.
Thank you, Majority Leader, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging the death of a 27-year-old man at Rikers this morning. His death marks the ninth death at Rikers this year and follows on the heels of Danny Ubera's death just 6 weeks ago. As these deaths and the continued violence underscore, public safety demands that we close Rikers without delay. I also want to acknowledge the heartbreaking death of 1-year-old Ella Vitalis in Brooklyn. Losing a baby is always painful and tragic, and my heart is with her loved ones and community grieving baby Ella's loss. I also want to take a moment to express my condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of 32-year-old Ryan Carson, a beloved community and environmental activist who was killed while waiting for the bus in Brooklyn earlier this week. By all accounts, Ryan was a passionate, devoted, and kind New Yorker who dedicated his life to preventing overdose deaths and creating a better future. Our hearts, as several of us knew him, our hearts are with his loved ones during this difficult time. Too many New Yorkers' lives have been lost and affected by violence. Comprehensive solutions that prevent violence and help survivors and communities recover from it are needed to advance public safety. In observance of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the Women's Caucus is partnering with the American Italian Cancer Foundation to bring a mammogram bus to the front of City Hall today until 4:30 p.m. They will be providing free mammograms for those ages 40 and up. So if you're eligible and interested, I encourage you to sign up through our Women's Caucus. On Thursday, October 12th, at 5:30 p.m., the council will be hosting its Hispanic Heritage Month celebration right here in the council chambers. Thank you in advance to our hosts, Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, and council members Alexa Aviles, Amanda Farías, Jennifer Gutierrez, Chris Marte, Carlina Rivera, Rafael Salamanca, Pierina Sanchez, and Marjorie Velasquez. We look forward to a fantastic and festive celebration. This morning, members of our Jewish caucus and other members and I had the honor of hosting a Sukkot celebration at the Sukkah in front of City Hall. And what I love about Sukkot is that it's an inclusive and joyous holiday that provides us the opportunity to break bread with our friends and neighbors. We also presented City Council proclamations to Jewish community leaders Saralei Idels and Ruth Lichtenstein. Chag Sameach to all who celebrate. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a time when we recognize and uplift survivors of domestic violence. Here in New York City, thousands of domestic violence cases are reported each year, yet we know there is an undercount due to the trauma and stigma associated with domestic violence, resulting in survivors living in fear and silence. We must all work together to end gender-based violence and advance solutions that keep survivors safe and help them recover. October marks the start of Italian American Heritage and Culture Month, German American Heritage Month, Filipino American Heritage Month, and Polish American Heritage Month. I also want to recognize October as AIDS Awareness Month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, and National Bullying Prevention Month. In the upcoming days, we will also be celebrating several important holidays, including Uganda Independence Day on October 9th, Cuba Independence Day on October 10th, Indigenous Peoples Day on October 10th, and World Teachers Day on October 11th. October 11th is also National Coming Out Day, which was first observed in 1988 in support of our LGBTQIA+ communities. It celebrates coming out as an act of liberation that confronts silence and ignorance and combats homophobia. Visibility is critical, and that's why we stand in allyship with our LGBTQIA+ communities. Finally, I want to wish a very early happy birthday to council members Julie Menon, Charles Barron, Bob Holden, and Justin Brannon. Now let's move on to our stated agenda. First, we'll vote on the following finance items: a transparency resolution approving new designations and changes of certain organizations receiving funding in the expense budget. Next, we'll vote on the following land use item: 42-18 31st Avenue rezoning will facilitate a 6-story mixed-use building with 33 housing units, 9 affordable units, commercial space on the ground floor, and automobile and bicycle parking spaces in Council Member 1's district. The council is modifying the application to strike MIH option 2 and add the deep affordability option, resulting in MIH option 1 and the deep affordability option as the remaining applicable MIH options. Today, we will vote on the following resolutions. Resolution 475, sponsored by Council Member Amanda Farías, calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the Governor to sign legislation to create a purple alert system for missing victims of domestic violence. Thank you to our staff members Elizabeth Arts, Christy Dwyer, and Sahar Mozami. We'll also vote on the following pieces of legislation. Introduction to 857A, sponsored by Education Committee Chair Rita Joseph, would expand disaggregated data currently captured by the Department of Education's reports, including reporting on the evaluation for and the provision of special education services to include students who are in foster care or in temporary housing. Thank you to our staff members Sahar Moazami and Nadia Jean-Francois. Introduction 576A, also sponsored by Councilmember Joseph, would require the Department of Parks and Recreation to inspect and issue a report on each public restroom under its jurisdiction that has routinely been given an unacceptable rating after inspection. The report would be required to be published on the department's website. Thank you to our staff members Chris Satori and Patrick Mulvihill. Introduction 1065A, sponsored by Councilmember Eric Bottcher, would require the creation of an urban forest plan that aims to expand the tree canopy from the current 22% coverage to 30% coverage. The plan would be required to evaluate the distribution, health, and stability of the city's urban forest, identify the causes of tree canopy and urban forest gain or reduction, and recommend strategies to remediate any urban forest loss, as well as prevent similar loss in the future and facilitate gain in the tree canopy. In addition, the legislation requires an outreach plan to educate property owners by providing them with information and strategies on how to protect and expand the trees and vegetation located on private property. Under this bill, the city would be required to collect data to monitor the effectiveness of the plan and the condition of the tree canopy at least every 5 years. The urban forest plan must be submitted to the mayor and the council and be updated every 10 years. Thank you to our staff members Chris Satori, Patrick Mulvihill, and Connor Mealy. Next, we'll vote on Introduction 703A, sponsored by Councilmember Sean Abreu, which would require the Department of Social Services to submit a quarterly report on the timeliness of rental assistance payments to the council and its website starting on March 1st, 2024. This legislation will help address late payments of CityFHEPS rental assistance vouchers, a growing problem that places New Yorkers at risk of evictions. Thank you to our staff members, Aminta Kilawan and David Romero. Introduction 78A, sponsored by Councilmember Gail Brewer, would require the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection to create an informal campaign concerning workers' rights under the Earn Safe and Sick Time Act. The campaign would include the distribution of flyers, posters, and other written materials through pharmacies, doctors' offices, and other health-related institutions to educate the public and workforce. Excuse me. Introduction 818, also sponsored by Councilmember Brewer, would require the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection to implement an outreach and education campaign regarding the Temporary Schedule Change Act. Under this law, covered employees have the right to temporary changes in their work schedule for certain personal events. The outreach and education shall be provided to employers, employees, and members of the public who are likely to be affected by the law. Thank you to our staff members, Elizabeth Arts, Ria Okasawa, and Natalie Meltzer, and Sarah Swain. Pardon me. And Introduction 1094A, sponsored by Criminal Justice Committee Chair Carlina Rivera, would require the Department of Correction to record all interactions when an incarcerated individual is informed of their scheduled court appearance. It would also require DOC to provide this information and real-time updates regarding an incarcerated individual's departure from their housing facility on the date of a scheduled appearance to defense attorneys. In addition, monthly data on court production outcomes would be required for submission to the mayor, the council, and DOC's website. More than 1/4 of people detained in our city's jails were not brought to court on time for their hearings and trials between September and December 2022. This record high rate of failure has contributed to growing lengths of stay for those detained in city jails. An April report by the Federal Monitor found that the average stay is 115 days, which is 4 times the national average. The longer those who are incarcerated stay in jail, the larger our jail population, and that must be resolved as we get closer to the 2027 deadline to close Rikers. It's critical that our city government takes steps to ensure those who are detained are brought to their court hearings and trials on time, and this legislation will help advance those efforts. Thank you to our staff members, Natalie Meltzer and Jeremy Whiteman. Thank you all for your attention, and I turn it back over to our Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. We're going to now move into the discussion of general orders. We will begin with Councilmember Brewer, and followed by Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you very much. I am here to talk about Intro 78 and Intro 818 mentioned by the Speaker. They are ongoing informational campaigns. First Earned Safe and Sick Time Act, which I call the Paid Sick Time Act, and Temporary Schedule Change Act. I want to point out this is the 10th anniversary of the passage of the city's Earned Sick Time Law, which I had a lot to do with many years ago. And I want to thank all the groups that were part of that, including the Better Balance, Community Service Society, Make the Road, CWA, and many labor partners and working families and all the individuals. It actually talked about, at that time, 3.4 million private sector workers in New York and 1.2 million who had no access to paid sick time before the law was passed. And since then, that law has been several times expanded to a good thing, more family, adding domestic violence, and increasing time available for workers at larger employers. The Temporary Schedule Change Act, passed in 2017, was part of a really wonderful council package of laws under the Fair Work Week and Fast Food Worker Empowerment bills. And yet 2 years after all of this, those two bills in particular, Community Service Society did a report finding that unpredictable scheduling abuses are still widespread, particularly for low-wage workers, and A Better Balance has also published a report finding the same findings. So we know that real change doesn't end with the passage of any law. That's why we have these two laws today. I want to thank Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine for your partnership on Intro 78 and Community Service Society also. I want to say in terms of the paid sick days, or it's called earned sick time law, I particularly want to thank former CSS employee Nancy Rankin because she wrote it. I also want to thank Sherry Lewin from A Better Balance. And then quickly, Speaker Adams, Chair Velasquez, and the Committee on Consumer Worker Protection, Chair De La Rosa, Committee on Civil Service, and all the amazing staff, Andy Velasquez, Rachel Cordero, Samita Demuka, Sarah Swine, Natalie Meltzer, Ria Oscarwara, and Elizabeth Arce, and certainly Shula Warren Puder from my office. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Rivera, followed by Councilmember Bottcher.
Thank you. We are voting today on Intro 1094A, a bill to create transparency and accountability to ensure that the Department of Correction fulfills one of its primary duties, which is bringing people to court. During the first quarter of this year, DOC's court production rate was at about 85%. Based on statistics from the Criminal Justice Agency, this is nearly the same rate at which criminal defendants who remain at liberty can be expected to attend their court appearances. Undoubtedly, many factors contribute to this problem, but among them are understaffing and antiquated management systems. These issues are unacceptable and must be addressed. This bill requires the Department of Correction to record interactions in which an individual is informed about a scheduled court appearance and report on rates of court production. Public defenders, family on behalf of detainees, and advocates testified at a May City Council hearing that incarcerated people charged with crimes are regularly not being brought to their court appearances, even though ensuring that they get to court is the primary reason why they are held before trial. This bill ensures accountability on both sides, as all stakeholders agree the most impactful way we can reduce the numbers at Rikers Island is to improve case processing and reduce the length of stay. Nearly a quarter of the individuals at Rikers have been in custody for over a year, and 87% of those on Rikers are pre-trial. Between 2016 and 2022, the average length of stay at Rikers increased 89% from 61 days to 115 days. When people are not produced for court, it further stresses an already backlogged court system. It can delay a person's release. It can delay connections to vital programs and services. Extended time in pretrial detention is bad for everyone. It increases the likelihood of conviction and subsequent recidivism, and it's essential we expedite case delays and at the very least, provide a very basic function. I encourage my colleagues to vote aye, and I'm very thankful to the Criminal Justice Committee staff, my own team, the legislative team, and the advocates. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Bottcher, not in his old yearbook wardrobe, and Councilor Joseph.
Thank you so much. Last Friday's flooding is just the latest reminder about how badly prepared we are to handle the effects of climate change here in New York City. It's yet another cry for help from our planet and a demand that we take action now. One of the actions we can take and must take is increasing the permeability of the surface in New York City. The water last week, it had nowhere to go. And we know that we can do that by planting street trees throughout every neighborhood in New York City. So today, instead of just talking about it, we are legislating it. Intro 1065 will require the Department of Parks to, in consultation with other agencies and stakeholders, government and non-government, to create an urban forest master plan and establish a goal of 30% tree canopy coverage equitably across New York City. It'll also require the Parks Department to conduct an outreach campaign to property owners on how to properly care for the street trees that we have. Since I took office in our district, we've planted around 500 trees. Many of those trees will not survive. We need everyone's help in caring for those trees. In addition to helping with stormwater runoff, these trees are going to purify the air, cool our neighborhoods in the summer, provide habitat for wildlife, and increase and uplift our quality of life all around. I want to thank Speaker Adams, Parks Chair Krishnan, the Forest for All Coalition, Carl Wilson and Hannah Moses from my office, and the council staff that helped make this bill possible.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Joseph.
Thank you, Majority Leader. As the Education Chair, I am excited about the passage of Intro 857A, a law that requires the Department of Education to expand disaggregated data into reporting to include matrix on students in foster care and students in temporary housing. This bill is personal to me as a mother of 2 boys who are part of the foster care system. I'm compelled to do my best to improving the lives of kids and young adults who are part of the system now. Too often, we neglect the level of resources and support we're providing for them to succeed. By requesting the New York City Public School to provide the data it's reporting to include metrics of students in foster care, students in temporary housing, we're ensuring that the data about them are available for us to evaluate and better assist them when they enter our New York City Public Schools. Also, today, we're tackling public restrooms in New York City. My bill, Intro 576A, in partnership with Manhattan Borough President, will require the city and New York City Park Departments to report on features, conditions of public restrooms. This bill will ensure that our public restrooms are accessible and well-maintained to ensure that we are upholding the model of equity and innovation in our city. I thank Speaker, Chair Krishnan, and my staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up to speak? Okay. We'll now move into, seeing none, we'll now move into the report of special committees.
None.
Report of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, Intro 78A, Workers' Rights Informational Campaign.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection, Intro 818A, Temporary Schedule Change Act.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Criminal Justice, Intro 1094A, Court Production Reporting.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Education, Intro 857A, DOE Reporting.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Finance, Preconsidered Reso 806, Transparency Resolution.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on General Welfare, Intro 703A, City-Funded Rental Payments.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Parks and Recreation, Intro 576A, Public Restrooms.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 1065A, Urban Forest Plan.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
General Orders Calendar, LU 260 and Reso 811, and LU 261 and Reso 812, 4218 31st Avenue rezoning.
Coupled on general orders, I ask now that the clerk take a roll call vote on all of the items coupled on today's general orders calendar.
Abreu.
Aye.
Ariola.
I'd like to disclose that DSNY is in the transparency resolution and my son Matthew is an employee of DSNY. I am aye on all with the exception of intros 1094A and 818A, of which I am a no.
Thank you. Aviles.
Aye.
Thank you. Ayala. Barron. I vote no on LU 260 and accompanying Rezo 811, no on LU 261 and accompanying Rezo 812, and aye on all.
Thank you. Bottcher.
Aye on all.
Brennan.
Aye.
Brewer.
Aye on all.
Brooks Powers.
Aye on all.
Caban.
Aye on all.
Carr.
I'd like to disclose on the record that in the transparency resolution, CUNY is being funded and my spouse is a student at CUNY, and I vote no on introduction 818A and 1094A, and aye on the rest.
Thank you. De La Rosa.
Aye on all.
Dinowitz.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Farías.
I vote aye on all.
Feliz.
I don't know, and I'd like to disclose that I work for the CUNY system, which we are funding today. Thank you.
Thank you. Gennaro.
Aye.
Gutierrez.
Aye.
Hanif.
Aye.
Hanks.
Aye.
Holden.
Aye on all except for intros 1094A and 1818A, of which I vote no.
Thank you. Hudson.
Aye.
Thank you. Joseph.
Aye on all.
Kagan.
I would like to disclose for the record that my daughter is a CUNY student and transparency resolution funding CUNY. I'm saying nay to 1094A and 818A and aye on everything else.
Thank you. Krishnan.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye on all.
Lewis.
Aye on all, and I would like to disclose for the record that my sister is a student at CUNY.
Marte.
Aye on all.
Mealy.
Aye.
Menon.
Aye.
Moya. Narcisse. Nurse.
Aye on all.
Osei. Palladino.
Aye on all except for 1094A and 818A.
Thank you. Wrestler.
Aye.
Richardson Jordan.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Riley.
Aye.
Rivera.
I vote aye on all.
Salamanca.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the Parks Department is funded in this transparency reso, and my spouse is associated with that organization, and I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Sanchez.
I'd like to disclose on the record that my brother is staff at CUNY BMCC, and with that, I vote aye.
Thank you. Schulman.
Aye on all.
Stevens.
I would like to disclose for the record that my daughter is a student at CUNY and also an employee for Presbyterian Hospital, and I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Ung.
Aye on all.
Velasquez.
I'd like to disclose on the record that my spouse works for DVP and that my brother is a board member of Samaritans of New York. I vote aye on all except 1094A, which I abstain.
Thank you. Vernikov.
Aye on all except 1094A and 818A. Thank you.
Williams.
I vote aye on all, and just disclosing for the record that I'm still a student at CUNY.
Thank you. Juan.
Aye on all.
Yeager.
Aye on all with the exception of intros 818 and 1014.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Riley.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to disclose for the record that we're funding the public schools and my daughters are students there. Thank you.
Thank you. Borelli.
I'd like to disclose on the record that I am a distinguished adjunct lecturer at CUNY, and I'd like to disclose that the speaker is actually the answer to a bonus question on my midterm next week. So with that, I vote aye on all except intros 1094A and 818A.
Thank you. Powers.
I don't think any of your students are watching, so I don't think they're going to get that extra question. But with that, I vote aye. Good luck to your students.
Speaker Adams.
They may be watching, Joe. I vote aye on all.
All items on today's general order calendar are adopted with a vote of 47 in the affirmative, 0 negative, and 0 abstentions, with the exception of land use items 260 and 261 and accompanying resolutions adopted by a vote of 46 in the affirmative, 1 negative, and 0 abstentions. Intro 818A adopted by a vote of 39 in the affirmative, 8 negative, and 0 abstentions. Intro 1094A adopted by a vote of 38 in the affirmative, 8 negative, and 1 abstention. We'll now move into the discussion of resolutions. I don't see anyone currently signed up to speak on today's resolutions. Oh, we're going to move to actually Councilmember Farías to speak on today's resolution.
I was going to pass today, but I'm happy to. So today we are voting on an important and urgent resolution of mine, Rezo 475, to call on New York State to create a purple alert system for missing victims of domestic violence. It's been reported that with each minute that goes by in the United States, 20 people experience domestic violence. That trend is only heightened here in my home borough of the Bronx and continues to have the highest rates of domestic violence in New York City. As we know, domestic violence is a nationwide epidemic that affects our families, our communities, and our society as a whole. In these dire circumstances, time is often of the essence. Therefore, by creating an emergency alert system specifically tailored to address missing persons in cases of domestic violence is an indispensable solution. This alert system has the potential to save lives, reunite families, and serve as a powerful deterrent against violent perpetrators. I stand united with my colleagues in fighting this issue both at the city and state levels. That's why I'm proud to have championed this resolution with my colleagues and members of the Women's Caucus to call on New York State to create a purple alert system for missing victims of domestic violence. Thank you to the state sponsors on this bill, Assemblymember Anderson and Senator Salazar, and Chair Caban for championing this issue and their leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else signed up to speak, we'll now have a voice vote on today's resolution. If you wish to vote against or abstain from today's resolution, please notify the Legislative Documents Unit by email or by approaching the dais. I'll now read today's resolution into the record. Resolution 475 calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the Governor to sign legislation to create a purple alert system for missing victims of domestic violence. Will all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any abstention? The ayes have it. We'll now move into the general discussion. We will begin with Councilmember Barron, followed by Councilmember Brewer. You have 2 minutes each.
Thank you, my colleagues. I wanted to bring you to the attention of a resolution I'm putting forth in protection of the African People's Socialist Party and their chairman, Omali Yeshitela. And the reason why I'm bringing this forward is because it's a severe abuse of power by the FBI on black activists who speak out in dissent against an American policy. I just want to read you a little part of it. On July 29th, 2022, at 5 a.m. in the morning, the FBI stormed the home of Omali Yeshitela, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party in St. Louis, Missouri. Yeshitela stated that the agents deployed flash grenades, carried automatic weapons, damaged the property of his neighbors, handcuffed him and his wife. Agents refused to show him a search warrant and absconded their cell phones and other devices in their home and destroyed much as they can. And why did they do this? Because they said they exercised their free speech to disagree with the American government on the Ukraine war. They were spreading Russian propaganda. They said that Russia talked them into doing reparations forums when they've been doing it for 50 years. So this resolution is saying, beware, because if it happened to them, it happened to Malcolm X here, the Black Panther Party, Panther 21. Tupac Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, defended the Panthers. They said they wanted to blow up botanical gardens. They were acquitted. This has happened throughout our history. W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, stopped the FBI from this abuse of power against those who exercise free speech and speak out on behalf of our movements. We're calling on the local police department not to assist the FBI in this abuse of powers. We say drop the charges, hands off the Uhuru 3, forward ever.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll now go to Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Carr.
Thank you. Intro 1211, it's a bill to provide those impacted by domestic violence with guidance on making voter registration records confidential. In 2021, Governor Hochul did sign a bill to make it easier for those impacted by DV to keep their registration records confidential, but people don't know about it. So this particular bill would require the Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence to distribute information to individuals receiving services at the Family Justice Centers and elsewhere, and assistance in preparing and submitting written statements to the Board of Elections so that their records are confidential. Number 2, Resolution 809 calls on the legislature to pass the Voting Integrity and Verification Act of New York. This is a response, as you heard, that the Board of Elections on the state level certified the Express Vote X11. Cybersecurity election experts universally pan the touch screen technology. Many states have switched back to voter-marked paper ballots, and this particular Express Vote uses Windows 10, and it might be less secure, so we're concerned about that. And then Resolution 810, I've been a long supporter of expanding voter rights to young people. This particular resolution supports the Hoylman bill to allow anyone to turn 16 by the end of December to register to vote in local elections, as well as to require that students in the 9th through 12th grade receive a minimum of 8 class periods worth of civics education to accompany that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. We're now going to Councilmember Carr, followed by Councilmember Arreola.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Kag Sukkot Sameach to all those who are celebrating in the city today, especially our colleagues. I appreciate Chair Dinowitz's invitation to the event earlier today. We're in the midst of Italian Heritage Month, and next week is Columbus Day. And my Italian caucus colleagues and I will be marching in the parade next week, and I invite any colleague here present and the rest of us who would like to join us to please do so on Monday. And I know Columbus Day has become a source of controversy in this city and in this day, but it was a hard-fought holiday for which Italian forebears of ours fought desperately for recognition. And our community endured significant ridicule, caricature, prejudice, discrimination, and even, unfortunately, at times violence in its mission and its quest to find a place in this country. And they did so. And this holiday has been celebrated for a number of years now. Its first time nationally was in 1892, thanks to President Benjamin Harrison. And it coincided actually with the first publication of our Pledge of Allegiance, a great marriage of Italian identity with its new identity here as Italian Americans. And it's been celebrated in statute since 1968. It is something for which Italian Americans are very proud. It's how we see ourselves as a community as being a part of the American story from its very beginning. And I hope that all my colleagues join us in celebration next week. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Areola, followed by Councilmember Riley.
Thank you. As a member of the Italian American Caucus and an Italian American who represents a district with one of the largest Italian American populations in the city, I categorically reject the idea of renaming Columbus Day to Italian American Heritage Day. Doing so minimizes the story of the Italian American struggle in the United States and glosses over the history that my ancestors and the ancestors of many of my constituents experienced as they fought for assimilation and acceptance into the wider fabric of this nation. Today, many people forget that struggle. They forget that one of the largest mass lynchings in the history of this nation was against Italian Americans, when 11 Italian Americans were brutally murdered in the city of New Orleans. They forget the stereotypes, the violence, the bigotry that our forefathers had to endure to make Columbus Day a federal holiday. The name Columbus and the celebration of Columbus Day has a much deeper meaning for many of us, much deeper than simply remembering the explorer and the individual. And that meaning should not and cannot be forgotten. It is a symbol of inclusion into America, of acceptance, and of defining our place in American history. The man himself may be a matter of debate for another area, but what that day symbolizes for Italian Americans is something very distinct. And for that reason, I urge my colleagues to continue to use the terminology that our ancestors fought so hard for. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now go to Councilmember Riley, followed by Councilmember Hanif.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I'm here to ask for your support on two bills I am introducing today, Intro 1217 and Intro 1218. Intro 1218 will require developers of economic development projects receiving $1 million or more in financial assistance from the city or city's economic development entity to provide prevailing wages to workers performing construction work at such projects. When the city agency or city economic development entity undertakes a project, they are not only signing up to improve and redevelop a property, but also to reinvest into those local communities with well-compensated employment opportunities. This bill will support job retention and growth for laborers, mechanics, construction workers, and others who deserve a prevailing wage. This measure is not about stiffening economic growth or imposing burdensome regulations. It's all about ensuring that as our city prospers, so do our hardworking individuals who pour their sweat and effort into building its future. When we guarantee fair compensation, we are strengthening our communities, reducing income disparities, and creating a more stable and thriving local economy. Intro 1218 carries the promise of fair and just compensation for our construction workforce, ensuring that no worker is left behind in pursuit of progress for New York City. Thank you to my colleagues, Councilmember Brandon, Ressler, and Juan for co-prime sponsoring this bill, and to all other members standing with me on this piece of legislation. Thank you to the New York City District Council of Carpenters for your partnerships and advocacy in supporting prevailing wages for the hardworking individuals who both literally and figuratively built this city. The second bill is Intro 1217, would establish a framework for collaboration between the Parks and Recreation and tree owners, striking a balance between safe recommendations and individual responsibilities for tree maintenances, particularly for structurally unsound privately owned trees. The Department of Parks and Recreation will be permitted to abate the danger posed by such trees if the owner does not, within the time established by the order, if the trees possess imminent danger. I encourage my colleagues to support both of these pieces of legislation for equitable pay and promoting a proactive approach to public safety. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Hanif, followed by Councilmember Schulman.
Thank you. 1218 is a great bill. Today I'm proud to introduce Intro 1212 alongside Councilmembers Ressler, Gutierrez, De La Rosa, Hudson, Sanchez, Nurse, and Juan. On September 22nd, the administration announced that shelter placements of single adult asylum seekers would be capped at 30 days and threatened to expand this policy to families with children moving forward. This policy is undeniably cruel. It is also counterproductive to our shared goals of getting asylum seekers to a point of economic independence. Forcing people out of the shelter makes it harder for people to apply for asylum, TPS, and work permits due to address change and lack of stability. We need to be setting our new arrivals up for self-sufficiency, not kicking them to the street. And let's be clear, street homelessness is the inevitable outcome of the 30-day rule. Our bill would end the 30-day rule by prohibiting the city from implementing limitations on stays at shelters, HERCs, and respite centers. It would apply to asylum seekers and longtime New Yorkers alike. The mayor's directive is a short-sighted policy, and the council needs to step up to prevent a spike in street homelessness. I want to thank the Legal Aid Society, Coalition for the Homeless, NILAG, Mobilization for Justice, Urban Justice Center, Open Hearts Initiative, WIN, Women in Need, Homeless Services United, and for their support and collaboration on this bill. I encourage my colleagues in the council to sign on to this legislation as a sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Councilmember Schulman.
Okay, what I want to talk about is a couple of things. One is the Sukkot ceremony today. I want to thank every single one of my colleagues who attended. It was one of the largest attended events that we've had. I want to thank the speaker for her unwavering support for the Jewish community. And I also, on a totally separate note, as a breast cancer survivor, I want to mention, I know that other folks have, that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. My breast cancer was found during a routine screening, so I encourage people to get screened. The Women's Caucus has a van outside of 253 Broadway. And one of my colleagues asked me, what are you doing this month for breast cancer awareness? And I want to make people know that I sent a letter to the governor yesterday. There is a bill sitting on her desk that would force insurance companies to pay for biomarker testing, which means for cancer treatment, which would mean that you get individualized treatment, and it's very cutting edge, and it's proven to save lives. And the governor's office got back to me today and said they're looking at it this week, so I'm very proud of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other folks sign up to speak? Seeing none, I'm now calling on Speaker Adrian Adams to close today's stated meeting.
Are you sure?
I mean, we can, yeah.
Thank you, Majority Leader. The stated meeting of October 5th, 2023 is hereby adjourned.